There was a time where being a guru and leading with your Lambo and flexing your I made it lifestyle actually worked. If you wanted to build a personal brand and you wanted to create trust with your audience and you wanted to build a business, that was a tried and true method. But I think we can all agree that we're tired of that. And if you look around, when I look around, I see small, authentic creators who actually care significantly, outperforming these gurus with 10 times the audience. They have stronger relationships with their communities, they're having a greater impact, and they're making more money. And in this video, I want to unpack what those creators are doing right, and how they're approaching things, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be able to walk away with some ideas, some lessons, some takeaways for how you can do the same. So we're going to call that the guru era. And I think the guru era needed to take place to get us to this point where creators like you and I can actually win by going all in on who we are. But I think back then, a couple of years ago, we saw that the people that were winning, the people at the top, were running that playbook. And because they were succeeding with that playbook, we started running that playbook. I think a lot of us, deep down, the reason why we started running that playbook is because we were scared. We were scared that we weren't going to be enough. We were afraid that no one would take us seriously. And I think deep down, a lot of us thought that we needed to be someone else in order to succeed. So it's not like we copied and ran this playbook just because we thought it worked. I think a lot of us genuinely had internalized this idea that this was the only way to succeed online. And unfortunately, I think this came at a great cost for a lot of the people in the industry. I think the imposter syndrome that we saw, the people getting creatively blocked and burnt out, came from us running this playbook. I think back to an experience that I had about 2 years ago where I had just had my best year in business and I had crushed and I rode that roller coaster the whole way up. And then the beginning of the next year felt like somebody shut off the electricity to my business. I went from the highest high to the lowest low. And back then I didn't really know how to handle that, but I was really feeling that emotionally. But I thought back then that I needed to show up as this successful person. So I never shared that with the people that I was creating content for. And because I wasn't sharing it, I started putting up this persona. And because I was putting up this persona, people weren't really connecting with that. But I think what really sucks about all of this is that I was robbing my audience of that beautiful lesson that, hey, like business is not just this upward trajectory, right? Business, a lot of the times you're going to have ups, downs. It is a roller coaster. But because I had bought into this guru playbook and believed that you had to show up like you have it all figured out and like you were at the top of the mountain, I never shared any of that. And I kept it all in. And guess what? Over time, that made me feel creatively blocked. It made me feel like an imposter. And I could tell it weakened the connection with my audience because there was a disconnect. The content that I was creating wasn't coming from a place of authenticity. I wasn't feeling the content. And because I wasn't feeling the content, my audience wasn't feeling the content. And I think that if you've ever felt any of these things, whether it is imposter syndrome or you felt creatively blocked, I think this might be the reason why you felt those things. But the good news is that that playbook is no longer working. Again, a lot of these gurus who were crushing it with this strategy back in the day are not doing so well these days. And I think audiences, people have gotten smarter. I think we've learned to see through the facade. I think we've stopped equating authority with image. But I think deep down, we're not just tired of it. I think at this point, we're turned off by it. And I think we're in this weird limbo where the old playbook kind of feels a little fake, and we're not really sure how to approach things now that the landscape has shifted. So let's talk about that. So how are these creators beating the gurus at their own game? I think it comes down to three different things. The first is understanding what authenticity is and moving from that place. So when I think of authenticity, I like to think of it as truth without distortion. It's about saying what's real without making it pretty, without spinning it, without distorting it. It's understanding that where you are, who you are, and your experience is enough. In practice, when you're creating content, here's what that looks like. It looks like saying, hey, here's where I'm at. Here's what I learned this week. Here's what I tried. This thing didn't work out. Here's how I'm feeling. Something I've started to implement into my content creation framework is before I go to record something, I pause and I ask myself one question. Is this true? Is what I'm about to share an accurate representation of the reality that I'm living? And if the answer is no, I know I need to go back and I need to realign. And I can tell you that the more that I start to speak from this place of truth, the easier it is for me to create content, because I'm no longer propping up this persona. I'm just sharing who I am and what I'm going through. And that's very easy to do. Propping up this persona, what you'll notice if you've ever done that is that it takes a lot of energy. I used to feel exhausted when I would create content. Why? Because I'm pouring so much energy into trying to show up in a certain way, trying to sound a certain way, rather than just being myself. So that's the first thing, understanding what authenticity is so you can move from that place. And we just spoke about personas, which brings us to the second point, which is to drop the persona. So if you think of a persona, what is that? It's a performance, right, of who we think that we need to be in order to be successful, in order to be liked, in order to achieve the things that we want to achieve. And again, I think it's important to understand why we build personas. We don't build personas because we want to be fake. We go back to this thing that we spoke about at the beginning of this video. We build a persona because we're scared. We think that who we are is not enough. We think that we need to be somewhere other than where we actually are in order to be liked and do the things that we want to do. So instead of showing up as ourselves, we show up as this persona, this grandiose version of ourselves that we prop up. But there's a problem with doing that, which is that when you start to approach content creation as a persona, you actually lose your power. You lose the thing that's going to draw people to you. That power is your authenticity. That power is your experience. And this nicely brings us to the third thing that small creators are winning or doing, which is they're moving from where they're at, regardless of where they're at. And this takes a lot of courage, because that fear that will that be enough is always going to be present. But if you take anything away from this video, let it be this. Your power is not being at the mountaintop preaching to the people below. Your power comes from being a couple steps ahead and being able to say to someone, hey, watch out for that rock. Or, hey, look out, it's slippery over here. The closer you are to the people that you're helping, the more relevant your advice is going to be. This is why, and I'm seeing this all over the place, creators who are authentically moving from where they're at, their messages are resonating because they're speaking from just having gone through the thing. And because they're speaking from that energy, the people that they're speaking to, they're not just hearing it, they're feeling it. It hits different when you just went through something and you're speaking about that thing. If you wait until you get to the mountaintop and you speak to the people that you want to lead, your advice is not going to hit the same. It's a bit counterintuitive because we think that we need to be, again, at the mountaintop. But trust me when I tell you, or don't trust me, go experiment for yourself. If you've been propping up this persona, try coming back to truth, try coming back to yourself, try coming back to your experience and speak from that place. And what you'll probably find is that people will actually connect with your message because they're not just gonna hear it, they're gonna feel it. All that to say that the guru era is dead and the authentic era has begun.